Six Nations, the final game of the weekend is Ireland against France, and it's a pretty tasty one. France, after really demolishing Italy in that game last week, they really looked the business. Dupont still looks like the best player in the world. Tadhg had a hell of a game as well. The forward pack was pretty dominant. And Ireland, it's such a hard one to gauge as well because with 14 men, they still were able to push Wales away from home to literally the last kick of the game, but they still managed to not come away with a win. So they are sitting fourth on the table with no wins and the one loss. France, the opposite record, big bonus point win puts them in first. So yeah, it's kind of a hard one to know exactly where each team is at, given that they played Italy. Were they that good, or was Italy that bad? Would they have won with 15 men? Where are they at? I guess we'll find out after this game. I'll go over the squads quickly, the recent history, some of the stats in the lead-up, and the predictions. You guys can let me know your thoughts on how this one is going to go. For Ireland, they have had to make some changes. Sexton is out. James Ryan is out. And Conor Murray is out. So some key guys of that Ireland squad throughout the years. I mean, I know James Ryan's still pretty young, but if you're thinking recent successful campaigns, he was a key part of that. Him and Jonathan Sexton have got the return to play protocols after head knocks last week, and Conor Murray has a hamstring injury. I know I'd like to see James Ryan playing, but you guys have got heaps of depth in locks in Ireland. I mean, you got Iain Henderson who steps up to the starting lineup. That's not exactly a bad thing. He's a hell of a player. And it means Billy Burns gets a crack at Tadhg. Now, he's going to have a heck of a lot of pressure on him, but we talked about him earlier in the week in a separate video, and people are, for the most part, behind that guy to have another crack and, not define his career based on one kick, which is sensible, which is what we like to see. I think last week some of the trolling and whatnot was maybe a bit of an overreaction, maybe some casual fans. I don't know, but I think most of us who watch a wee bit of rugby know that everybody makes mistakes every now and again, and it's good for him to get a crack. Now, that is probably going to mean a little bit of extra pressure on him, and up against France, that's not ideal, but it would have been not ideal to either way, like chuck Ross Byrne straight into the starting lineup as well. So, I don't know. I'm keen to see Billy Burns have a good game. At least he's got kind of 80 minutes, or at least like 60 if he doesn't get injured, to show us what he can do, because I do think he's a decent player. I know some people kind of doubt whether he can make that step up to international level, but he needs some minutes. Sexton's in his mid-30s. Some of these guys need some minutes. So Billy Burns for now. We can think about Healy and the other Byrne at some point as well, but Billy Burns at 26, he needs some minutes. So let's wish him well. Jamison Gibson-Park also comes in at 9 to replace Murray. Henshaw and Ringrose are still in the midfield, and they were spot on last week, so we expect to see more of the same from them. James Lowe and Keith Earls are still on the wings, and Hugo Keenan, he was really assured at fullback. Like, I still have my doubts about him just because he's not the biggest guy, but he seems very secure, so he's winning me over week by week. He's certainly got the talent, but I sometimes worry about him under the high ball, but he's been really good, so I look to see him continue to do more of the same. Forward pack, same front row with Healy, Herring, and Porter. Tadhg Byrne still there in the second row. Man, he was good last week. I'll get to some of his numbers a bit later, but man, he's the business. And as I mentioned, Iain Henderson comes into the starting lineup from the bench, and he is captain. You guys have a lot of locks in Ireland, so good news. Bad news for Ryan, but good news that Henderson is in there as well. Rhys Ruddock also gets a crack at number 6, which is also pretty pleasing. Peter O'Mahony is obviously suspended, so they needed someone else to step up, and by all accounts, he's been playing very, very well for Leinster. So a proper 6, that guy, proper in your face, bit of a grafter. He's going to make the French guys uncomfortable. That's what he's there to do. Likewise, Josh van der Flier. We want to see him a bit more of the breakdown, but he's going to be trying to make the French backs uncomfortable because he's pretty quick for a Lucy. And CJ Stunder, someone called him a barrel of a man. He is a barrel of a man. And if he runs at you, just ask Talupe Faletau. You better be ready, because otherwise he will knock you on your backside. So, yeah, it's still a pretty good Ireland team without some of those big names available, without Peter Amani Murray, Ryan and Sexton. You've got Ed Byrne who's also coming to the lineup as well. Kelleher's still on the bench. Furlong's on the bench. Dillane's coming into the squad, obviously with James Ryan dropping out and Henderson stepping up. Will Connors is in the bench as well still. I can't remember what the exact numbers was. I should have written it down, but he made, because he didn't play that many minutes, he made, was it 4 tackles and 2 of them were dominant? Or was it 5 tackles and 2 were dominant? I just know that his dominant tackles rate, once the Six Nations fixed their stats, because they were a bit broken, were very impressive. The guy loves a big tackle. So let's see more of that. Craig Casey also is on the bench, so very pleasing to see him get a crack. Hopefully he comes on and gets some decent minutes. Ross Byrne, as I mentioned, is also there, and Jordan Larmour continues on as well. So it's still a pretty good looking Ireland lineup, and I kind of like the idea that we're spreading some minutes into some guys that could use them. I'm not sure Jamison Gibson-Park is the answer, but maybe throwing Casey into the starting lineup would be a bit much, so maybe do the minutes 50-30, 50 for Jamison and then 30 for Casey. We'll wait and see. For the French lineup, it's maybe a little less changed. They have tinkered with things a little bit, but it's not a heck of a lot of changes. By Marchand and Hawass is still the same front row as last week. I think they put the Italian scrum under a bit of pressure, but the Italians didn't do too badly. Remember, they changed their props pretty early on, did the Italians. Leroux and Willemse are still there in the second row, so no changes. That'll be a good battle between them and Tadhg, Byrne and Henderson. Jelenic comes in at 6, so he swaps places with Cretin, who was there last week. Olivon's still captain at 7, and Aldrit is still there at 8. It's hard to talk too much about the French forwards, because they were solid without being spectacular last week, where it was all about the backs. It was all about Dupont, it was about Thomas, it was about Vincent, but it's on the back of the French forwards' performance, right? So they may not have been doing the flashy stuff, but they were doing the grunt work. Speaking of the backs, though, you got Dupont and Jalibert still 9 and 10. I don't know what you can do about Dupont. You can try and close him down, but he finds space, he finds the offload, he can kick through a gap that doesn't seem to be there. If you put 2 men on him, you're going to create gaps somewhere else, so that will be an interesting one, a bit of game management. Fiku and Vincent are the midfield, and they were pretty impressive last week, but up against Henshaw and Ringrose, overall, were those the 2 best midfields? I know Redpath and Harris were pretty good for Scotland, but I think overall in terms of midfield combos, it's probably both these sides that were the best last week. So that's going to be a very tasty clash. Villiers, who was good last week as well, he packs a punch for a guy who's not that big. He's got more power and pace than he looks. Penaud comes in for Thomas, so Thomas switches to the bench. Maybe that's a bit of his defensive play under question, because I know he had a hell of a game, and offensively he was phenomenal, but he still missed a couple of key tackles, so maybe they're worried a little bit about the Irish attack in that department. But Penaud is just a good guy to have playing. And Dulin is there at fullback. The bench is Bugari. Collingar comes in along with Antonio. They are replacements into the 23. Tafa Fanua is still there. Cretin, like I mentioned, swaps. Serrant is still there as the backup number 9. Thomas drops to the bench, as I mentioned, and Bouthier comes in. Carbonell is out. I didn't read if he's injured or if it's just a tactical change. But yeah, overall, the squads are looking pretty impressive. In recent times, it's been pretty close matches. Last 5 is 3-2 in Ireland's favour, and it seems to be, for the most part, the home side winning, except 2018, obviously that last-minute droppy from Johnny Sexton was a bit of an iconic one in 2018. But yeah, it's been a pretty decent split. The most recent result over in France was 35-27, that final Six Nations game, which saw both sides fall short of what they potentially could have done. But it was still a good French win. Average score over those last 5 games is 19-16, so pretty tight. And generally in Dublin, Ireland get the job done. 2011 was the last away win for France. They actually got 2 that year. I think one was a Rugby World Cup warm-up game and one was a Six Nations game. France did a double. But yeah, generally in recent times, Dublin's a pretty happy hunting ground for the Irish. So we'll see. No crowd is definitely going to be a factor in that one as well. And remember that the French have got an extra day's rest because they played on the Saturday, whereas Ireland played on the Sunday. So it's a full week because it's another Sunday game, but it's just an extra day. that the French have got up their sleeve. In terms of the stats, like France are dangerous on attack, and I mentioned their backs. Tadhg had 7 broken tackles in that game against Italy. He's number 2 in the whole comp behind Stuart Hogg. Vincent is 5th overall with 5 broken tackles, but so is Ringrose. Ringrose also had 5, so they're kind of 5th equal. So that's what I mean about it being a pretty tasty matchup in the midfield. Dulin is also up the top of, not the top, but like top 5 in stats for both kick meters and run meters. So he's a genuine all-rounder, and that at fullback he can run it back at you and cause you all kinds of strife. Like he helped set up one of the French tries in that game last week, but he can also kick it back with a bit of venom on it as well. So you're going to have to be very careful kicking him the ball. France had 6 turnovers, 1 against Italy, 4 at the breakdown, so they are going to make life difficult for the Irish in that department. But when you look at Ireland's stats, 4 breakdown steals against Wales, so they both had the same number at the breakdown. So it's going to be interesting to see which side comes out on top, because both had the better of the game in their games last week against Italy and Wales, respectively. Ireland love a carry, that's for sure. They're not the biggest team on kick meters, like they're 5th overall. They're only ahead of Italy on kick meters. They had 870 according to the Six Nations stats, whereas all the other teams are pretty much in the thousands. Like Wales is 990 something, and the top 3 are all well into the 1,000 kick meters. But Ireland love a carry. If you look at the top 3 guys for carries last week in the Six Nations, and they're all Irish. Byrne with 21, Henshaw with 19, and Stander with 18. So Ireland like to truck that ball up. If you look at Wales's tackle stats last week, they had to make a ton because Ireland just keep battering on that door, right? So that will be a test for the French on defence. But with Sean Edwards, coach defence, they'll certainly back themselves to close that door. We will see. The odds for this one, the bookies have got France as the favourites by 4 points. However, on the flip side, the rugby forecast algorithm has got Ireland by 1. I would say that's largely down to the home advantage. But yeah, man, this is a really tricky one to pick. Do you go with a red-hot French team? Or do you kind of put a bit of a question mark with that performance that it was against Italy? It's hard to, given some of the skills that we saw. But some of the Italian defending lacked a bit to be desired. But the French can do that to you. And Ireland at home, like I mentioned, they don't lose very often to France, and not in the last 10 years. They're a tough side, and despite having one man down for the majority of the game last week, they were still bloody competitive and could have had a different result. But anyway, we'll see how this one goes. The kickoff time, I think, is 3 o'clock local time. I know it's 4 o'clock in the morning over here in New Zealand, so I may be able to crawl out of bed to watch this one because I sure don't want to get spoiled, because this one, on paper anyway, it looks like it's going to be an absolute clash. You guys let me know your thoughts on how this one's going to go. Ireland at home or that young French team away. Anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts. Talk to you again soon. See you later. Six Nations this weekend. Ireland taking on France. How are you going to watch it? You can watch it on ITV. ITV is free. If you're in the UK, which is good news, you can see the game is listed here. If you're outside the UK, use VPN. I'm connected to East London. I'm using ExpressVPN. I will chuck a link in the description for that one. Basically, on the ITV hub, categories, sport, and then when you go to find the rugby, it'll be there. It'll be there live. And it will be there on demand as well. Here it is, Six Nations Championship. So you can watch it live. I guess it'll be here when you're watching live, or if you're watching on demand, these games will be here. So it's a pretty convenient service. Like I mentioned, live or on demand. That's a hell of a photo right there for old Garbisi. But yeah, man, it's pretty straightforward. If you're in the UK, happy days. You get it for free. If you're outside the UK, as I mentioned, VPN, connect to the UK server, and you'll be able to jump on and watch the games live or on demand. You do need to watch ads on ITV is the only kind of drawback, but in the scheme of things, it's all pretty doable. But anyway, like I mentioned, link in the description, guys. Check it out. Watch the rugby, and I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.